Hello and welcome back to Allergy Today. My name is Alice Rose and I'm joined by
Quentin Howard.
And I'm Ruth Holroyd, and today we're going to be talking about our week, and we have a very exciting special guest, exciting for me, Lucy Nicholson, who runs Lucy's on a Plate in Ambleside, and we chatted about her in a previous episode of the podcast, and she really does have her kitchen under strict control and the allergies are all catered for.
I'm looking forward to that. We'll give her a ring in a moment. First of all, let's talk about some things that have happened in the news recently. One that was very sad was the 18-year-old boy who died from eating a burger.
Yeah, it's just so tragic. Every time one of these stories comes up, you just can't believe it's happening in a way. And that
seems to be one after the other, doesn't it?
Yeah, and that it's exactly that. It's just still happening. So shall we expand what...
Yeah, so his name was Owen Carey, and he went to buy a burger at Byron Burger at the O2 Arena in London, and he told them about his dairy allergy. Now, I must admit, if I had a dairy allergy, I wouldn't think to ask when I was buying a burger. So what happened, Ruth? What happened with this story?
It appears that the staff weren't really aware of this either, but there was buttermilk on the actual chicken, so it didn't look like it had any milk in it, but it was marinated in buttermilk. So Owen wasn't told that, and the staff didn't know that. The problem with that restaurant is they were going with the verbal communication. So if you're looking at that burger, yeah, you're right, it looks like it's got no dairy in it. It was cooked in dairy, and that then makes it unsafe for someone with a dairy allergy.
And what they're saying now, the family are saying that it's not good enough. The verbal communication isn't good enough. The restaurants are often noisy. Staff turnover is really high. And also customers tend to often be young, so they just have to change how this is done, don't they?
Yeah, so he died 55 minutes later. There was some...
in the arms of his girlfriend. Oh, it's just heartbreaking.
It's just heartbreaking. Now, did he have an EpiPen? Did he have antihistamine?
No, he didn't have his adrenaline with him, which is another thing which we talk about in one of our other episodes with Dan, who is a bit older than Owen, but young men are quite at risk because where do they carry their adrenaline? They are the ones that leave it behind quite often, which is one of my bugbears, that you have to be carrying them all the time.
But it must be said, the blame needs to lie with the restaurant, doesn't it?
It's staff training, isn't it, and the communication.
The staff were asked the question and they couldn't answer it, so they must have been lacking in some kind of training. Now, I understand that, in fact, that they've upped their game. So there's a quote here from Emma Kocher, Owen's sister, who said that Byron have really upped their game, and they do go above and beyond now as to what the current legislation says, and they proactively ask if anybody has allergies. So they've learnt, but it took a death to do that. How many more times is this going to happen before something changes, and what needs to change?
Well, I just think from what I've learnt is that people just need to start taking allergies more seriously. It needs to be on a higher priority list, and it cannot take a death to change this. It mustn't.
Yeah.
It shouldn't.
I wonder if when people have reactions, whether they report it as well. In my case, in most of my allergic reactions, and in the case with Owen, he's left the premises, he's not there. If he didn't have a serious reaction, if he got better, would he have gone back to that restaurant? Would he have just never gone back to Byron? Would he have complained? Whole story there of what we do when we have less severe reactions. They're still bad, they still might have put you in hospital, but you haven't died.
If I'd gone back to a place because I'd had a reaction, I don't think I would have got much engagement, frankly. You can imagine a scenario. Hello, I came into your burger shop yesterday. I felt very ill for 24 hours. Can I speak to the manager? And the manager will just write it down somewhere.
Yeah, exactly.
Nothing will change.
Nothing will change.
But we have to keep reporting these things.
Yes, it might be a pain in the arse for you to go back to that restaurant and talk about it when you're fine now and it's over and done with, and probably you just want to get on with your week.
But you want to give them a red card.
But yeah, exactly. And so actually the responsibility needs to be on both sides,
on customers.
Yeah.
One of the things that I've started doing is reporting restaurants to the Food Standards Agency, especially if I think there's some learning needs to happen. You report it and the Food Standards Agency will look into it. You don't have to do anything.
What do they do when they've got that complaint?
They speak to the local council, and then just as you would with a worry about food poisoning or unclean kitchens or something like that, they will investigate, and it comes under the same remit as the environmental health people.
Is that easy to do, Ruth? Like, can you just call
up
a number?
No, not really.
Oh, isn't
It's a long questionnaire, but I've done it a couple of times now.
What if they had an app where you could just report something quickly and easily. It's this kind of stuff, this developmental funding.
I mean, it's not that hard, but you've got to go and look for that and know that you can do it.
It's probably
not many people probably know.
Exactly, not many people probably know, and it's probably enough of a barrier, isn't it, to just think, do you know, I can't be asked doing that.
You've moved on. If it's not a serious reaction or you haven't had to go to hospital, you just move on. You
never go back there.
Never go back.
And especially if you have been, if you've had experiences in the past where you haven't been taken seriously and people have just gone, oh, sorry about that, then you just think, what's the point, I suppose?
It sparks a whole load of ideas in my mind about how we could address this. I think the app would be a terrific thing, a Report It app, if it was managed in a proper way, so that you knew that it was going to the Environmental Food Agency, they were tracking all these things, and then there were some follow-up.
I've had follow-up every time. It's quite slick once you've done it.
All they need is people to know about it and to make it easier to do.
Yeah.
But if you made it an app, you'd do it while you're in the restaurant, not 24 hours later when you download the form off the internet.
Yeah, exactly. And it gives the consumer the power back, doesn't it? Because it's like, right, this has happened to you. Here you go. Here's a really easy way to do something about it without you having to feel awkward or put yourself in a more vulnerable position after you already feel vulnerable.
So let's appeal to our listeners to the Allergy Today podcast. Would an app help you to report places to make the world a better place? Would that be enough to give you the incentive?
Let us know.
Do get in touch with us. You know how to do so. Social media, the hashtag is AllergyToday, or you can email us at hello@allergytoday.co.uk.
That's the one. So, Ruth, you shared an article about how the headline was quite dramatic, wasn't it?
It was, wasn't it?
What was it? Have you got it?
Trendy nuts.
Something like...
Beg your pardon?
Trendy nut milks put coffee chains out of bounds for allergy sufferers. That was in the Telegraph.
Makes a really good point, which I had never considered before. It's not that it's now out of bounds, is it?
It's just not safe, and I've blogged about this before. If you go into the coffee shop, we're all familiar with the beautiful machines they have, the spout that they froth the milk with.
I'm so tempted to do the sound effects.
Oh yeah, with a bit of coffee shop nattering in the background. Like it. Love a cafe.
If you just look at that for 1 second and you've got a serious dairy allergy, you're not going to buy a coffee made from that.
The dirty rag that's been wiping all of the milk residue off of that spout.
Long ago decided that's not good for me.
That spout is dipped in milk. So if somebody wanted a different kind of milk, so an almond milk or a soy milk, presumably they would steam heat that as well with the same spout.
Yes.
Yes.
Now you've got cross-contamination of dairy milk.
Wiping the outside with a soggy rag is not going to get the allergens off.
Well, why not? For two reasons. One, it's going to be inside the spout.
Inside the spout, yeah.
And secondly, they're only going to give a cursory wipe.
It's really making me not want to have a milky spout coffee.
And I've heard that people have said to me, oh, well, the steam gets rid of the allergies. It doesn't.
I used to work in a coffee shop many moons ago, and I have been one of those that used the dirty soggy rag on the milky spout.
And actually milk is quite difficult to get off things because it does stick.
Yeah.
It doesn't wash off with water.
No, it's gross, and by the end of the day you have to really give it a good scrape because it's all on there and it's from the whole day. It is actually quite gross.
And there's cross-contamination the other way, of course, because if somebody like me who can't do almonds, if they were to swidge some almond milk and then give me dairy milk, there would be a potential for cross-contamination there.
Exactly.
So it works both ways.
You probably haven't thought about that, have you?
Never thought about it.
But you were saying, Ruth, there is a workaround, isn't there?
Take your own milk, yeah. Or just make them pour milk straight in. Just don't have nice hot steamed milk. That's the safe option.
Doesn't that defeat the object of one of these coffee shops with 42 different kinds of mocha chocolate knocker coffee?
It is a bit of a shame.
I still enjoy going for a coffee, though.
But what do you have?
Just recently I have been having plant milks, but I will watch them, pour it into my drink.
And what do they say when you challenge them?
Probably think I'm slightly weird. And I've been given hot milk instead of oat milk. It was like a language barrier. I had said oat milk and she'd said, oh yes. I thought she said oat milk back, but she said hot milk.
Hot milk.
And I asked for oat milk and she said, oh, you say hot milk. So you think, they sound so similar that you can get confusion. Yeah,
that is lost in translation, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I am really, really fussy. And can I watch you pour my milk in, please? I don't trust you. Come over here and do it.
Once again, it's all about trust.
Yeah.
And can we trust the barista? Can we trust the waiter? Can we trust the restaurant?
They're doing thousands of coffees in a day, so they just go on autopilot.
As we say time and time again, it's a world of jeopardy out there.
Yeah, and even with friends making me a coffee, the amount of times it happens, and these people that know, and they'll be handing me my drink, and they're like, oh, I've just put milk in.
So come on, Allergy Today listeners, tell us your stories. How do you deal with the barista in your local coffee shop? Are you fastidious like Ruth is, or do you limit your choice from the menu to something that you know will be safe? And should you limit your choice? Well, you shouldn't have to feel you're excluded just because you've got allergies and they can't be asked to do anything about it.
Could they have like
two spouts?
Steamers?
Yeah.
Yeah, but you've got soya milk.
Yeah.
Somebody could be allergic to that. Someone could be allergic to nut milks, but not almond milks.
I mean, it's a minefield, but
It is a minefield.
they have to. That's
their problem.
Their problem.
Exactly.
And you know, they are the service providers. Work out a service which caters for your customers.
Be inclusive, not exclusive.
Yeah.
I've got a little handheld steamer, so you could always just froth them.
Well,
manually.
what's the point of going to a coffee shop if you're going to make your own coffee, bring your own milk, and bring your own steamer?
Can you picture me in the corner? My own little portable kettle.
I think you've got the business model wrong here of service.
I know.
That is a really good point, though. So really, addressing that balance is really important, isn't it? Because as much as we say, you know, take ownership of your allergies, and you still want to get that balance of actually being able to walk into a cafe or a restaurant and enjoy the service that everyone else has.
There's work to do on the coffee shops.
Definitely.
So, guys, tell me, how have your weeks been, Ruth and Quentin? Should we start with you, Ruth? Because it's not been a happy one, has it?
It hasn't been that great. I haven't done very much apart from nurse myself because I've managed to get shingles, which is horrendous. If anyone has had it, they will know. So painful. I've never experienced anything like it.
Oh. And did they think this is a side effect from one of the medications you were taking?
I think so. I've been having blood tests while I've been on methotrexate, which is supposed to help with my eczema, and I think it has helped with my eczema, but if this is the side effect, then it's not a good option, really. This is horrendous, and I now can't take that drug anymore because it's given me shingles. And I think older people are more susceptible to it because it's something you can get in old age more. And when you're run down, people with cancer can be at more risk because they've got a lower immune system.
And your immune system at the moment must be going haywire because you've given up topical steroids.
Yeah, it's probably not great. And I'm on this drug that is an immune suppressant. So we'll see. We'll see what happens now. I'm off the methotrexate. Nothing bad so far. I'm in so much pain, I'm not even thinking about scratching.
Is shingles contagious?
No, you can't catch shingles from me, but if you haven't had chickenpox, you could catch chickenpox, but only if you came into contact with the virus. So if you shared towels or flannels or something. So it is highly contagious, but not really if it's covered up.
Seems horribly unfair, Ruth, that, you know,
I know.
you've gone through all of this stuff and then actually, as a side effect, this is going on. Oh, well, that is
But I'm
rubbish.
feeling good today, guys. You've cheered me up.
Well, that's our job.
Yay. Well, we are wishing you better from afar.
Indeed.
Thank you.
We're over the airwaves today, aren't we? And
Yes.
what about you, Quentin?
Do you know, this has been the first week that I've had no issues since we started this podcast.
Wow.
One, I'm delighted to hear that, but two, that's interesting because that's quite a good few weeks now that we've been recording this.
Yep, I know I've had no
weeks-
food issues this week and I've not had any asthma or eczema flare-ups. So I'm feeling pretty good at the moment. Yes, I'm sorry to say I'm in the peak of health. It's a relative term.
Brilliant.
Yes, it is brilliant, and we should celebrate the weeks where there are no issues or problems, because that is the goal, and that is good to hear.
So I got a green star this week to go on my chart on the fridge.
That have I got to see me.
But
What about your week, Alice?
Oh, my week has been. I am almost halfway through my pregnancy, so I don't fancy a lot of food at the moment. I mean, I fancy food, a lot of food, as in quantities.
What are you craving?
I'm not particularly craving anything, actually. I just want to eat a lot and all of the time.
No changes, nothing you've noticed that you eat that you're not so keen on anymore?
Do you know, the first time I was pregnant, I couldn't face a vegetable in the first trimester, wasn't interested in fruit, couldn't drink coffee, and I love coffee. So, but this time, not so much. I've actually been craving more sweet, fruity things. Uneventful food-wise for me. But we have had a good chat today, haven't we, Quentin?
We have, because we're in the offices of Food Matters, and we've been recording another podcast, which should be out any day now, the Food Matters podcast.
It was so interesting, wasn't it? And it was a really interesting panel discussion from lots of quite high up people in the food industry.
And one of the topics of discussion was about transparency, that people who've got allergens just need to know what's in the food, and you need to have traceability right the way back to the production plant, and that does not exist. The conversation in that podcast was interesting because it does exist in the organics world. If you claim to have organic carrots, you have to be able to trace back to the farm exactly how much insecticide you have or have not used in order to have the organic stamp.
So it's possible.
It begs the question, why don't we do the same for allergens? Ruth, you must have come across this before in discussion.
I have, because I've had people say to me, we're not sure what's in this because it's not something we made here. You know, they've bought it in and they haven't got any assurances from the person it came from. Yeah, I have been told that before, and sometimes you take a risk.
So it would be good if the food industry had traceability, and I wonder how difficult it is for them to set up a scheme like that. Or maybe there's resistance from the food industry to do it. You can imagine the lobbying against it. Interesting to be in the room when they're doing that.
Yeah. I think they already see catering for people with allergies as a lot more work. Like, you've got to make up your menus, you've got to mark them with what allergens are in there, and then you can't deviate from that menu at all, that recipe. And I think we're already seen as hard work.
Now, I had an interesting experience this week related to this. I went to buy something in Waitrose. There was a green sticker on the product which said recipe change.
Oh.
I've never seen that anywhere else.
That's good.
And boy, could I do with that, because when they do change the recipe, as somebody with allergies, you need to know what they've changed.
Yeah, because I guess you have your kind of like, I know this is safe, I'll grab that.
Exactly. It was just something like a sausage roll or something, but they had actually changed the recipe and they flagged it up with a little green sticker. And I thought, well done you.
I have had that before with something where I was eating it and my mum was then sitting there going, oh my, stop eating this, change the recipe and it's got nibbed almonds in it. But yeah, we hadn't noticed.
It was quite interesting. We were talking about free from and the future of free from, and the fact that there's been such a massive trend in wanting to eat vegan or vegetarian food and the impact that that's had on the food industry. And then we were kind of talking about the impact that's had for people who live with allergies, weren't we?
Because vegan foods are on the rise and particularly young people are making the choice to go vegan or plant-based, the food industry is still lumping that together with allergies, and it's probably dealt with by the same department. And it shouldn't be, because they're different.
It's not the same, no.
And I don't know about you, Ruth, but I've experienced when you say something about allergies, there is an element of assumption you must be a vegan.
Yeah, I've had that happen to me loads of times, yeah. So you then get, not only you're not getting any dairy or anything, you're not getting any meat either.
No, give me meat. I need my meat.
I've been most aggrieved when that happens. And also, if a vegan is given something that's not plant-based, like say there's milk in it, they wouldn't necessarily know. But if a dairy allergy person is given something with milk in, they would be really ill.
Yeah, one's a choice and one isn't a choice. Yeah.
And I'm not sure if people take so much care for somebody that's making a choice.
I wonder with vegan foods, actually, whether there is a need to worry about cross-contamination.
I mean, you'd think that they'd be passionate about it and that...
I'll bet they're not.
I think vegans are, though.
People offering them the food, maybe not.
That's another edition of the Allergy Today podcast, I feel sure.
Yeah, vegans would be horrified, but
yeah.
I wonder how much.
So transparency is about being able to see what the ingredients are. And one of the guests on that podcast, the Food Matters podcast we took part in, Julie Klein, she is from the Sustainable Kitchen. And she made an interesting comment about restaurants who cater for people with allergies and do that as part of their service. And I was thinking then about Lucy's on a Plate in Ambleside. And Ruth, you went there a few weeks ago, and we talked about it in the podcast the other week.
We did.
And we said we'd
stop going on about it, could I?
You couldn't. You liked, what was it, the pudding that you liked?
It was a lemon drizzle.
Lemon drizzle. Oh. See, Alice remembers.
I remember.
So let's get Lucy on the phone. Let's have a chat to her and find out a little bit more about her restaurant and how she deals with people. So let's dial her now.
Good afternoon, Lucy.
Hi, Lucy. It's Ruth.
Yeah, how are you?
Good, thanks. Yeah.
Hi, Quentin.
Hiya.
Hi.
Hi, Alice.
So glad you were free at short
Well, funnily
notice.
enough, I've literally just walked into the office.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
We just want to do a little sort of feature on Ruth's experience of going to your restaurant and being bowled over, I think, by the attentiveness
Very kind of you.
you gave. So, Ruth, just quickly sort of tell your story.
We were just phoning you really last minute as well, and they had a place available for a group of 4 and not a problem to cater for me. And Lucy, you spent about 20 minutes chatting to me about my allergies and then also calming my aunt down, who always gets a little bit worried about me. So yeah, thank you so much for that, because it was we all had a lovely meal. We're all blown away by the food.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Particularly me, that lemon drizzle pudding, which is kind of like taken over the whole
It's lingering
meal.
in your memory, is it?
Yeah, I just wanted a bit more of that, really.
So, Lucy, tell us about this restaurant that you run and how you cater for people like Ruth who've got all sorts of allergies.
I started a deli because I love people and I love food. And I also found in those days, which is 30 years ago, there was no internet, there was no telephone, as such mobile phones. It was very difficult to find things that were for people who had particular needs for particular foods. And 30 years ago, food was definitely not on the radar in the way that it is now. People didn't really appreciate that what they put in was what they would get out, so to speak, and also how much it affected their health. My eldest daughter, who, before I tell you the story, was 33 now with 2 children, was diagnosed with leukemia when she was just 2 years old. And the only route that we could take to hopefully potentially cure her was that of chemotherapy. I'm quite into alternative medicine and don't like the idea of putting too many horrible things in you, but there was no other way. So I knew there was a lot of writing and things in America, and I looked at those about you are what you eat and how you can heal yourself through food. And that's how I found out about gluten and dairy and how it affects the gut. And so although I don't believe feeding her a gluten-free diet cured her, I do think that it massively helped with her acceptance of the chemotherapy and her ability to resist some of the side effects, the sickness, the inflammation of the gut, the mouth ulcers, constipation, all that kind of thing. And she didn't have a lot of the effects that the other children had in the ward by not, she didn't much like not having gluten sometimes, no toast off the trolley in the morning. She knew what she could and couldn't have, even as a little girl. And I kind of then translated that into what I did in the shop. And I got really into it, and I realized how many people, everybody thought I was cranky, but how many people really did need it. And somebody once said, I need all the gluten I can get. I said, well, that's fine, but, you don't even know what gluten is, and I can promise you if you did, you wouldn't need all the gluten that you could get. And that's how I came down the path of opening a restaurant that made sure people were aware of what was on the page and all the rest of it. And now, of course, thankfully, we have to be very allergy aware and very conscious of what we put into the foods that we feed our guests. I enjoy doing that.
What's the approach you take? Do you have a standard menu which is gluten-free, or do you consult with each of your guests and make something specially?
No, I don't. We have a standard menu. So the majority of what we do is gluten-free, and we're sort of erring more towards being dairy-free as well, wherever possible. By law, you have to be aware of the allergens. I mean, there are quite a lot of main allergens now that you have to be aware of to inform your guests of when you run an establishment such as ours. It's quite a responsible thing. But in terms of what we do, we're quite well known for being unique and, individual, I think. We're well known for being individual. So, we don't stick to a script in the sense of, if somebody comes in and says, I can't have sugar or I can't have a particular ingredient, celery or what have you, then, we're able to identify and tell them what they can have, which is a much nicer way of saying it than what they can't have. We have our own menu, but because of the way our menu is done, I mean, most things do not need to have certain ingredients in. For example, why do people thicken soups with flour? They don't need to. A potato is just as good.
Of course. Yeah, never thought of it like that.
It's a really refreshing way of looking at it. And certainly a lot of the menu was marked up so well that I only needed to check, does this pudding have nuts in? And I'm praying that I can have the lemon drizzle, which I already know is wheat-free and dairy-free. So it's it was really a nice experience for me.
And I love there that you were talking, Lucy, about looking at the things that people can have and not what they can't have.
Exactly.
And I think from, I'm learning a lot about doing this podcast, and it's all, having to take away the choices all the time. So to be able to incorporate the needs of people is just such a lovely experience.
I did, and it was more like, rather than feeling like I can have something but there's a load of bits missing from that meal, which is quite often the case.
Of course.
I had a different turn on avocados.
You make sure that the food looks and tastes the same.
Very much. I mean, the first bites with the eyes, whatever your food preference, whether you're, a carnivore, a meat eater, a fish eater, a pescatarian, or a vegan, or you can't have, sugar, wheat, flour, soy, all the rest of it. You still want to be able to find the food that's really appetizing, and I'm sure Ruth will remember and know the days when, you had bread in tins and it was like a brick. You could commit a murder with it.
It would probably last 5 years, yeah.
Yeah. It's only, we make, really nice gluten-free bread and we're, I think the key for having a nice experience, or should be the key, is communication. So to walk into a restaurant who have no idea of what your allergies or intolerances are, or that you have any, is kind of catching them blindsided. People say to us, we've got somebody in our party who is a celiac or who is intolerant to dairy or can't have nuts. It means then that we are already advised of that when they come in. So we don't need to make them feel uncomfortable. They don't need to make us feel uncomfortable. It's a two-way street. And so I do think that knowledge is key. If you are phoning ahead to book a restaurant, then just let them know. I always let them know that I don't want to sit in the middle of the room, for argument's sake. And then, hopefully I'm put on a nice cozy corner somewhere. Because from a restaurateur's point of view, knowledge is key. And what we know we can deal with. And it's the same in everyday life, isn't it? You have to deal with knowing that what you are going to eat is going to suit your needs. And we have to know that what we're serving you is the right thing.
Yeah.
Can I ask you, Lucy, what would your advice be to the people who run the restaurant that actually turned Ruth away? Like, what would you say to them about how they might be able to approach things differently next time someone with an allergy gets in touch and does let them know, look, I'm coming in, I've got all these allergies. What could they do differently?
I think you have to have a different head on as far as your training, your staff. Somehow I'd like to think that people who ran businesses changed their attitude. I mean, there's an old adage that says the customer is always right. Let me put that to you differently. The customer is not always right, but we have to make them believe that they are. So same thing, different way, really. But it makes my staff feel a lot more comfortable and able to deal with problems, because the customer may not be right, but, the member of team has to try and make them feel right. I think where a restaurant is advised in advance, gosh, you've already got an advance notice. You should be able to say, yes, of course we can do that. Is there anything else could you tell us what you can have? What do you like? So finding out what they do like is much better than finding out what they can't eat. I mean, finding out what they can't eat is important, but then find out what they do like. What, do you like fish? Do you like meat? Do you like vegetables? Do you like sauces? All those sorts of things. How many restaurants do you go into and you know full well that the staff haven't been trained?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And I got the feeling that
think
they were
the
just
bottom
scared.
of the food chain.
That's such a refreshing attitude. I don't think I've ever been asked, what can you eat? It's a negative process. What can't you eat? Oh, I leave the rest to us. And that
you get a bland.
You're putting your trust in them, and you don't really know whether they know what they're doing. But to be asked positively what you like is such a refreshing and simple thing to do.
So when are we going to Lucy's on the Plate for a meal?
You'd be very welcome.
I definitely group trip, I think.
There we go.
Yeah, I think that definitely. I mean, I love people. And I think, we're all individuals. You could serve a meal, the same meal, it doesn't matter whether it's got things in it or it hasn't, but to a group of 4 people who have no intolerance, but everyone would have a different take on what they thought about it. Somebody might not like it. It might be too spicy, too wet, too strong, all kinds of things. Nobody has the same taste experience as the next person to them. So we need to find out what people do like. And sometimes restaurants just put things out thinking that that's what the guests want because it's, popular or it's, So I learned that from the shop. I worked on a demand and supply, not a supply and demand basis. And that is a much better way of looking at your business really, is to say, okay, what is it that you would like that we can give to you that will make your overall experience a really nice one? And I say overall because that's what nobody remembers good food over poor service. But they always remember good service over poor food.
Very good.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So I've got one final question. I wondered how many people you get requesting special dietary meals like I did. Is it common?
Daily. And sometimes I'm looking at the diary tonight. I've got three gluten-free and one dairy-free that I know of. Those are the people that say, oh, just so you know, I'm dairy-free or gluten-free. But most people don't bother to tell us because they know that we will accommodate them because they've eaten here with us before or what have you.
Your menu's so
more
good.
And more common.
Well,
Thank you.
make a beeline for Ambleside and Lucy's of Ambleside. Lucy's on a plate. Sounds like the place to go.
It does. And when you do mention that you're going and have a chat with them beforehand, you're on the menu. It will say, it said that we were there, the Lafferty party of 4, and it mentions someone's birthday and someone's anniversary. There's a little paragraph at the beginning about who's going. It's just such a lovely idea.
Yeah, tell us what you're celebrating, even if you're just celebrating being above ground, and we'll mention you.
Love it. Absolutely love it.
Well, I hope we see you again before long. I hope, Ruth, you're here before long with your lovely overzealous aunt, who I thought was wonderful. We should all have somebody who protects us like that.
Oh, it's lovely having that person behind me. It is, because I'm often a bit blasé. So
it's the possibility, Lucy, that you've got puddings that I can eat and desserts, because I don't eat eggs, so I avoid desserts. It's just easier.
Oh no, you mustn't avoid puddings when you come here. There are so many delicious ones. We have delicious baked peaches. We have deconstructed crumbles and lots and lots of things that don't have to have eggs in. Rice pudding doesn't have to have an egg in unless are you dairy free as well?
No, just eggs.
So you should try our coconut rice pudding. That's delicious.
There you go. Lucy, lovely to talk to you. Thank you for sparing the time.
Well, it's been lovely to talk to you too. I hope you'll come and visit us at some stage.
Definitely. Thanks, Lucy.
Good.
Thanks.
Bye now. That's a pleasure, Ruth. Nice to talk to you. Bye.
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 So I think that she's a bit of a pioneer. From what I have learnt through doing this podcast, she seems to be definitely not the norm in her approach to this. Would you say that?
She's been doing it for years as well, like way before everyone else was. She was doing it.
So she's a trend leader, but you don't see that in restaurants as a common thing. It's still the case. You go into a restaurant and it's what can't you eat rather than how can we make something that you can eat. And there's a big difference in that.
So much different. The language around it is really, really important, isn't it? And I think, if you're someone who lives with allergies and your restrictions have already been, put upon you, you haven't made these choices.
I've always been of the thought that I'll just make it so easy for people. So I do have the same thing all the time. So when somebody like Lucy does go to these lengths, I don't have to have a steak or ham, egg and chips, which is what I have everywhere.
You're right, actually, and I do the same.
So exciting.
I just default to what I know is going to work, which when it comes to puddings, it generally is, have you got any fruit?
A sorbet, please.
Not even that. Can't trust a sorbet, because sometimes sorbets are made with white of egg.
No.
So you'd have to check.
And you have to check.
Ask.
And then when you ask, you get this interesting reaction. They don't want to tell you because it's come out of a packet.
Yeah.
And I've said to them, just give me the box of ice cream. Oh, no, the chef won't allow it out of the kitchen. Give me the bloody box so I can read the ingredients myself, because I don't trust you.
Go out there.
So there's such a lot to do, and actually restaurants could do a lot by moving to this allergy-friendly approach that Lucy has without it being deleterious to them. It won't do them any harm.
And for anyone who doesn't know what deleterious means...
Thank you, Alice.
It means it won't do them any harm.
Won't do them any harm.
I don't know what it means.
I was wondering the same.
That's your word of the week on the Allergy Today podcast.
Hey, we should keep doing that. Word of the week.
So we thought that we might start sharing the odd recipe for you to try out, and we have found a really nice one because Ruth was so obsessed with her lemon drizzle cake from Lucy's on a Plate. I've gone to Michelle Berrydale Johnson's website, foodsmatter.com, where she's got loads of recipes, and there's a free from lemon drizzle cake recipe here. So I'm going to read out the ingredients to you, Ruth, and you tell me if you can eat this cake. So it says that it's gluten, lactose, milk, nightshade, nut, peanut, sesame, soya, and wheat-free. And the ingredients are, number 1, dairy-free spread. Do you eat that?
Yeah. That's fine.
Okay. Caster sugar or light muscovado sugar.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2 large eggs. That's you out, Quentin.
That's me out.
I'm still in. I can have this. Keep going.
I'll have a sorbet.
You can
Sit down,
use,
Quentin.
I don't know if it would work in this recipe, but I know people use bananas instead, don't they?
You can substitute in cake, especially in cakes.
Yeah.
It might work.
I don't know how it would affect the taste, but in this particular one. But anyway.
No, I think I can do a flax substitute.
For wheat.
For egg.
For egg? Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Does it have raising powers?
I don't think so, but it goes like an egg. It goes really gloopy.
Oh, so it's actually
Like
the binder
so
rather
like
than
binder,
a raising agent.
not a razor,
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Dove's Farm gluten and wheat-free white self-raising flour.
Yeah, that's fine.
1 to 2 lemons.
Lovely.
Poppy seeds.
Yeah, they're okay.
Icing sugar.
Yeah. I can have
There
that.
you go. So you can recreate
I might have to try that.
Yeah, do it. That is on foodsmatter.com under all of the recipes. And if
Lovely.
you go to baking, there's also a puds tab. So I think we should make one of these recipes every week and eat
should.
it
Okay, you're on.
while we're doing this. And we would love to hear from you if you make one of these recipes as well. We'll add them to the show notes. So we have just been joined by Bryony Mansell Lewis, who we've sort of like gate crashed your offices today, haven't we? Well, Bryony was like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, come on in. But we're very grateful for the space. And we would love to hear from you, Bryony, a little bit more about Food Matters Live. So tell us a little bit more about it.
Yes, Food Matters Live takes place in November at London's Excel Centre. This will be the 6th edition, and what it aims to do is it puts innovation at the heart of the food and drink sector. So we cover all the kind of main trends that are happening, so everything from free from to all the innovations in free from the ingredients right the way through to the finished product. We also look at things like plant-based foods, gut health is another really important one coming through. And we have over 250 speakers across 2 days coming and sharing their insights and their expertise with the audience. We basically connect so people looking for new ideas, new solutions and ingredients with some of the latest innovations on the market, as well as buyers. So buyers from food service and retail looking for some of those new, young, emerging brands.
I'm really interested in the word innovation here because that seems to me to offer, I guess, like new hope for people with allergies.
We've obviously seen a lot of change in the free-from category since we've been doing this, but also we've seen the ingredient sector really step up and really trying to provide solutions that will work for people with allergies, becoming more educated, I guess, themselves about some of the breadth of allergies that are out there.
Do you see the big challenge still in the education of food producers, getting them to understand a simple thing like the difference between allergy and intolerance, and the more complicated things like making sure that their food processes are trackable and traceable?
I think there has been a huge shift in that. I think there's obviously still some way to go, but it's very complex. And I think the food and drink manufacturing sector, I think, has definitely embraced some of the challenges. I think some of the big issues also lie in food service. They have some really significant issues there in terms of, trying to be able to meet the needs of, consumers who might have different levels of food intolerances and educating their own staff.
And what about your own story? Why did you get involved in the allergy world?
Oh, we were looking at the food and drink element, looking at the food and drink sector, and obviously we could see this huge sort of, shift in the free-from sector. And, it fitted with what we were trying to do around innovation. And we could see that you see so many products coming out into the market now that have free-from claims and also where those free-from elements are meeting things like plant-based diets as well and the need for that. So it made perfect sense for us to be able to put a focus on it.
Do you think there's a confusion between people who are making lifestyle choices about foods, so deciding to go plant-based or vegan, and allergy? Is that healthy or unhealthy, the overlap?
I definitely think there is some confusion. I think it's very different if you are choosing to follow a plant-based diet out of personal choice rather than actually the need that you have to. And I do sometimes think that maybe there's just a little bit of not quite understanding or that empathetic element there.
What's the fix? Is it about the terminology? Is it?
I think it's about the terminology, and I also think it's about a greater understanding. But still, from everybody, from all the players, really. I think from the food and drink industry, the ingredients sector, the producers themselves, the retailers, and how they position the whole category. It's like everything. It's a bit like obesity. You know, there's not one silver bullet here. You know, everyone has to work together, I think.
Yeah.
I've been a few times now, and I find I really enjoy it because it's completely different to the allergy show. And you get to actually speak to some of these companies that are producing the foods. It's fascinating because it's just vast. It's a massive show.
Would you say, Ruth, then that, I mean, obviously it's a business to business show, but actually as a consumer you find it really beneficial to go along?
Yeah, I've been a couple of times, and certainly it's very different, really interesting. And there's some famous talks as well that go on in the middle with famous chefs.
The Hestons of the world.
They're really interesting debates that they have.
Yeah. Do you feel, Bryony, do you feel quite hopeful for the future? I know you're saying there's loads that needs to be done, and there's lots of...
I do. I think one of the things that we've seen over the course of the time I've been doing Food Matters Live is the explosion in the amount of young entrepreneurial startup companies coming into the food and drink industry. I think the Food and Drink Federation say 97% of the UK sector is now made up of SMEs. I've met many entrepreneurs in the last few years who've brought out, you know, products to market and driven out of their own needs. But with that comes a challenge in the fact that they don't necessarily, because they're not from the food and drink industry, they don't necessarily have the expertise, they don't really know how to make health claims. You know, they run into some kind of problems with the dietetic community sometimes. And I think one of the challenges is that that level of innovation is growing at such a rate that almost for everyone else to keep up with it is really hard. Yeah. And of course that means that as a consumer, if there are products that are coming out to the market and retailers are stocking them, rightly or wrongly, it potentially leads to further kind of consumer confusion.
Bryony, I'm going to put a magic wand in your hand now. Here's the magic wand.
Very nice.
And you can do anything you like with that to improve the world of allergies, people who suffer from allergies, the politics or the health side of it. What would you do with your magic wand?
I think, touching on that point around this sort of explosion in young entrepreneurs bringing products to market, some of which are great, I think I would really like to see greater collaboration and understanding across the sort of whole food sector, whether that is the dietetic community, who can often be very vocal about some of these young brands and what they're bringing to market. It is very much the fact that they can bring these brands into the market that is, sometimes causes much of the debate. But I would like to see everybody working more closely together. I think if I had my magic wand, that's what I would do.
And they can do that at the show in November.
They certainly can. They certainly can.
Brian, it's been a pleasure having you on the Allergy Today podcast. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for the use of your lovely office in London.
You're very welcome.
Come and share with us if you have had any experiences. We'd love to hear as well if you make the lemon drizzle cake recipe that we've just shared, and we will be making that in the next few weeks, and we'll let you know what we think of Ruth's cooking.
And don't forget to subscribe and rate us wherever you get your podcast from, like and share us on social media, and do get in contact with us with your stories so that we can share them on Allergy Today.
Don't forget to use our hashtags, which is Allergy Today UK on Facebook, and on Instagram and Twitter, Allergy Today.
And you can email us on hello@allergytoday.co.uk.
So thanks for joining us for this week's podcast. We'll be back again with another edition of the Allergy Today podcast. From all of us here, goodbye.
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 And just a reminder that the Allergy Today team will be at Food Matters Live at Excel. We're recording 2 live podcasts there. The first on Tuesday the 19th of November is at 1:15 in the afternoon, and we'll be talking about thriving with allergies. And our panellists include Dan Kelly from May Contain, Lindy Wee Lewis from the Allergy Table, Natalie Newman, the founder of Intolerant Gourmand, and her son Callum Newman. That's on Tuesday the 19th of November, and our second live podcast will be recording on Wednesday the 20th of November at Food Matters Live. That one starts at 12:15. And on the panel will be Dominic Teague, the executive chef of Indigo One Aldwych, Sue Garlick, the head of technical services at Eridus, and Sarah Wren, the founder of Oscar and Bentley's restaurant. And we'll be talking about the challenges of people with allergies eating out and the restaurant trade. So do join us if you're going to Food Matters Live at Excel in London's Docklands. Allergy Today is a Quidem Productions podcast.